Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the New York Post. This one is dated July 21st, and I almost couldn't believe this when I saw it. It says Pete Buttigieg, Department of Transportation spent $80 billion on DEI grants, delayed air traffic control upgrades, records, industry, and it says records and industry insider. So what the hell did they spend that on? Where did that $80 billion go? I don't know if we're going to find this article because I will be reading it for the first time here along with anybody that decides they want to click on my video. And thank you for doing that if you did. It says former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg failed to replace outdated air traffic control systems while in office, with his agency instead shelling out tens of billions of dollars on a DEI agenda, according to federal spending records and airline industry insiders. And I think Sean Duffy, the current DOT secretary, has already upgraded or is currently upgrading the air traffic control systems. Like, that was one of the first things he decided to do, and it was like, yeah, we could just go do it. And so what took this guy 4 years to not do at $80 billion, and Sean Duffy comes in and just snaps his fingers and like is getting it done. Anyway, it says in one meeting, Buttigieg, who is said to be eyeing a 2028 presidential run, oh dear God, told industry executives that air traffic control upgrades would just allow them to fly more planes. And so why would that be in his interest, sources said. He's the DOT secretary, even though he had no experience with any of that stuff. But, he's a diversity hire, so yeah, there you go. This is what his department was really interested in, was handing out hundreds of diversity, equity, and inclusion grants totaling more than $80 billion over 4 years, at least half of the DOT's entire budget for a typical fiscal year, records show. So again, what the hell were you doing? And, well, here's the answer. It says he was definitely pushing an agenda, an air industry official said, noting the Transportation Secretary had little to no interest and took definitely zero action toward air traffic control modernization. I think that's pretty obvious. He had other things he wanted to do with that money, which was anything but make things better for people. As Buttigieg spent his time in President Joe Biden's cabinet blaming the airlines for their delays and vilifying the industry as a whole while denying his department's DEI agenda led to any air traffic control staffing shortages, or was maintaining an ailing safety system that hasn't been updated since the Carter administration, sources told the Post. So the air traffic control system is as old as I am. That's pretty sad. It says the flying public paid the price, insiders said. As at first, the Department of Transportation and he were reluctant to say there was an air traffic controller shortage, or that the shortage had anything to do with flight delays or flight cancellations, the air industry official said. So why do we have a Department of Transportation? Why do they exist? I mean, remember, Pete Buttigieg also went on paternity leave for 2 months, which, say whatever you want about paternity leave, but 2 months, really, dude, you didn't have the kid. And also, no one knew you were gone the whole time, so who cares? And sorry if my phone is, you hear like a Super Mario getting a coin. I got a text message. You're probably going to hear it again because I'm not going to check right now. It says Chris Meagher, a spokesman for Buttigieg, rejected both claims and pointed to increased air traffic controller hiring under the former transportation big, as well as software changes to improve efficiency at airport runways, new flight routes projected to cut up to 100 hours off time travel annually, and the development of communications technology to decrease flight delays. All stuff that people would want, and he just went, eh. It says Biden's infrastructure law also provided $5 billion to improve air traffic facilities, towers, and power systems, he noted, and Pete spent that on none of it. So suggesting that Secretary Buttigieg chose not to pursue air traffic control modernization is absurd, said Meagher, adding that Biden's budget request for the fiscal year 2025 included another $8 billion in funding that congressional Republicans blocked. I'd say, well, it's probably a good idea that they were blocked, considering he spent a whole ton of money on absolute nothing. Says Secretary Buttigieg's focus was always on safety, not just in aviation, but also on roads and bridges, where 40,000 Americans die on our country roads each year. Fixing issues with air traffic control was a priority. Yes, such a priority, he did absolutely nothing with $80 billion besides DEI stuff. Says the DOT's Bureau of Transportation Statistics shows that most flight cancellations, 54.3%, were caused by weather during Buttigieg's term, whereas a little more than one-third, 34.7%, were attributable to air carriers. Yeah, that's what it said. I almost said aircraft carriers. I was like, wait, what? It says just 10.6% were due to failures in the national aviation system. It says nearly 80% of flights were on time between January 2021 and 2025. I don't know the industry numbers, but I hope that's good. I mean, 80% certainly seems good. I mean, that's what, a B minus. So someone tell me if you're out there and know the numbers, if that's actually good or bad. Says almost 7% of delays were due to air carriers, another 7% for late arriving aircraft, and 5% was attributable to the aviation system. Less than 1% were attributable to weather. It says airline industry officials acknowledge that carrier delays persisted coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, I'll give them that one. But argued that much of the infrastructure law's funding went to maintenance of facilities and equipment, which is roughly $3.5 billion annually, not modernization. As they argued that while hiring improved in recent years, there was still a high dropout rate and surging retirements from veteran air traffic controllers. So if you start with a thunderstorm early in the day and it ripples throughout the day, which is the way it usually works, by the time you get to the 8th flight, it's just tagged as a late arriving aircraft, an industry official said. No matter what the original cause of the delay was, that always gets tagged to us as our fault, so it's a complicated story. Doesn't really seem that complicated, but okay. Despite the requested changes to the air traffic control systems early in his term, Buttigieg seemed more interested in being good on TV than fixing the archaic systems that were flying up to 182 million passengers per year, officials said. Yeah, he doesn't care. I mean, he thinks he's going to make a good president. Like, literally the only thing you need to bring up about why he'd be a crap president is this article right here. It says the Federal Aviation Administration had been chronically understaffed for years, with the agency employing only around 80% of the target for certified professional controllers at least since fiscal year 2017, which airline officials argued was the main factor forcing delays and cancellations. And you should probably go look up why they're understaffed. Starts with the letters DEI, if you catch my drift. Because in January 2023, the agency ordered the first nationwide grounding of flights since the September 11, 2001 terror attacks that left thousands of passengers stranded. The 2023 grounding was due to an FAA system outage. I remember that. It says in an urgent letter to Buttigieg's DOT in April of 2024, Air Industry Trade Association officials warned that at the current rate of hiring, it would take as long as 90 years for the FAA to reach its targeted staffing levels in some of the critical New York air traffic control centers. Well, that's bad. Sometimes I have to travel to New York for business, to New York City, so now I'm kind of worried. At the same time, the focus of the department under Buttigieg also shifted, with roughly 400 DEI-related grants approved, according to a review of federal spending between 2021 and 2024. It says just 60 grants for diversity, equity, or inclusion initiatives were approved during the previous administration, totaling no more than a few $billion, which is a few $1 billion too much. It says programs such as Justice 40 ended up shelling out 55% of around $150 billion in infrastructure investments to disadvantaged communities, pursuant to an executive order Biden signed to advance equitable outcomes, or communism. It's all equitable means, okay, or equity. It's communism. This Biden's $1.2 trillion infrastructure law in 2021 provided much of the funding, but some Democrats were critical of the outcomes, including a $5 billion equity effort to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations that resulted in just 7 being built by June 2024. It sounds like California's high-speed rail problem, like pretty much a mirror of that. This internal White House polling showed that airline issues and airline consumer issues were key polling successes, an industry official said. At this point, the White House didn't have a lot to sink their teeth into from a PR standpoint. As Meager said, the department's DEI grants didn't delay the work of the FAA and were a separate, siloed transportation mode. Says you can walk and chew gum at the same time, he responded. FAA operates completely separately than other modal administrations. So it happens that FHWA doesn't have a meaningful effect on FAA or NHTSA because they operate independently. It's separate staff, separate budgets, separate programs. Says Buttigieg often lashed out at the airlines, blaming the industry, not the FAA, which controls airspace nationwide, for canceling flights and biking passengers through junk fees. Oh, well, thank God for that. It says just 12 days before the election, Buttigieg's DOT moved to implement a federal rule giving passengers compensation for every delay and canceling of up to $1,000, even if it was higher than the original fare, prompting a blistering statement from a top airline trade association calling it a political stunt. Yes, that's what it is. You can't do that. You can't sit here and say, like, if your flight's delayed, we're going to give you back more money than you spent on your ticket. The airlines, I don't think, are doing great monetarily anyway, and that's a surefire way to get them to go completely under. But he's a communist, so he doesn't know how money works. So Secretary Buttigieg is proud of the work he did to improve the rights and protections of consumers, which is like what did he do? It says, like, making refunds automatic when airlines cancel a flight. Oh, wow. Proposing a rule, and I'm saying that sarcastically, proposing a rule to ensure parents can sit with their children for no charge when they fly. why would there be a charge for that in the first place? So, okay, I guess that would be a decent thing. And ensuring individuals that fly with wheelchairs are compensated if airlines damage them. Well, that would be like a normal thing. They're damaging your property. They should compensate you for that. So it says U.S. DOT also insured nearly $4 billion in refunds to consumers as a result of investigations into consumer complaints. David Grizzle, who served under former President Barack Obama as the FAA's chief counsel, acting deputy administrator, and chief operating officer of its air traffic organization, pointed out that paying less attention to aviation than highways or bridges wasn't abnormal for a transportation secretary. That's a very big job, and it covers 7 different modes, Grizzle noted, while acknowledging there certainly were no remarkable achievements in aviation during Buttigieg's term. Well, yeah. Anyway, says the shortfall in budget is something that really began in the 2010s and has really gotten worse over time, he added. As of last month, an Emerson College poll of registered voters found the former transportation secretary leading the 2028 Democratic presidential primary field with 16% support, followed by ex-Vice President Kamala Harris at 13%. Who is thinking about voting? First of all, who is thinking about voting for either of them? Second of all, why her? She's vapid. Really? We need to go through that again? Okay. Says Echelon Insights in July showed him in second place for the potential primary, trailing Harris by 15 percentage points, 26% to 11%, in support from Democratic and Democratic-leaning voters. Guys, get better candidates. These two are horrific. Says with the passage of President Trump's big, beautiful bill earlier this month, Republicans have now approved $12.5 billion in additional spending for Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy to revamp the old Federal Aviation Administration systems. It's not so much that prior administrations have been especially indifferent. He's just been exceedingly attentive, Grizzle said of Duffy. I've been on the blue ribbon panels in Trump and Biden. He will stand out for decades as one of the most engaged secretaries we've had. Yep, and that's the end of the article. That's a long one. I didn't think it was that long. But what do you think about that? I mean, Pete Buttigieg basically was just like, I got $80 billion and not really going to do a whole heck of a lot with it besides things that have nothing to do with actually like aviation stuff. But again, he was useless. Remember, too, when the East Palestine thing happened, that accident, that it took him like 2 months to actually go to it, and then he acted like an idiot. So yeah, that's what we were dealing with. Just a moron who was in government to probably make money, not to actually do things and help people out. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.